Welcome to Spotlight on Schools. We focus on Rochester City schools. I'm your host, Jim Strauss. In Governor Cuomo's most recent budget, more than 170 schools were identified as facing state takeover unless they improve their graduation rates or test scores. In Rochester, that list includes 10 schools. On the persistently failing list are East High School, Charlotte High School, James Monroe High School, and School Number 9. On the failing list are Northeast College Prep High School, Northwest College Prep High School, and schools 3, 8, 17, 22, 34, 41, 44, and 45. Dr. Freddie Thomas High School is also on the list, but it's already closed. East High will open under the operation of the University of Rochester this fall, and the Rochester City School District has already announced that Charlotte High School will close. In an April 25th column in the Democrat and Chronicle entitled "School's Death Penalty is a Farce," Erica Bryant noted that since 2004, the Rochester School District has opened and closed 34 schools. She cited a number of examples. Here's one, and I quote, "Franklin High School closed in 2004. The three schools, Franklin Global Media Arts, Franklin Bioscience, and Franklin International Finance, that opened up in its Norton Street building lasted less than a decade. Now the Franklin campus hosts Integrated Arts and Technology High School and Vanguard Collegiate High School." End of that quote. Later in the column, she says this: "Students, teachers, principals, and staff have been shuffled and reshuffled and reshuffled in the same buildings with the same concentration of poverty and problems. The graveyard of schools with aggressively aspirational names continues to grow." She ends the column with this: "Handing out harsh penalties to failing schools while ignoring the root causes of educational failure is a doomed strategy. It might help politicians who want to look aggressive. After more than a decade of this approach, what do we have to show?" There are strategies that can work in Rochester. These strategies are supported by research and have worked in other urban areas. Returning to this program is John Bliss, a longtime Rochester City School teacher. John has taught both within the Rochester City schools and in charter schools. He's the founder of the Urban Choice Charter School. You may recognize his name from several guest essays he has written in the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. He has been critical of the direction of the city school district, and he has research-based and experience-based ideas about the way things need to change. Welcome to Spotlight on Schools.
Glad to be here.
Okay, we had a conversation before we started this program in which you told me you had responded to this essay by Erica Bryant.
I did.
What did you say in it?
Well, I said she's missing a key point. Now, I would agree with her that the shuffling has gone on for too long and it hasn't worked. She made reference to the point, I think the point she was trying to make was, as long as these kids are impoverished and they're coming from the same conditions, we're not going to improve things no matter what the state does. And I would probably have some debate with that as well. At least I would question that, because I know kids can succeed regardless of the conditions that they come from. But I think the main point that I wanted to make in the article was, one of the things that the state identification process does is it puts a spotlight on these schools. Keep in mind, if New York State didn't say these schools are failing, it would be up to the New York City School District itself to make those changes. And while I agree that the changes being made are not sufficient, I would say that the designation is still incredibly important, because otherwise you're leaving that process to be handled internally. And I don't think that's a good fix at all. So that was my concern.
Rochester School District has known that these schools haven't worked, and they've tried new things. These new schools, for instance, the three that they tried in Franklin, they didn't work.
Right.
A lot of things haven't worked. What you've suggested is a template, and we'll talk about that in just a minute,
right,
that will work. Apparently these didn't follow those templates.
Well, they did. Not only do I think that they didn't follow kind of the philosophical template that I'm suggesting, but there's no question that if you look at the development of these schools, how they're created, and then how they were supported afterwards, they're not nearly as detailed or articulated as they should have been. So, I would agree with Erica, putting giving some of these schools a fancy name and expecting different results is crazy. It's got to be a lot deeper than that. And I may be in the minority, but I just don't think that too many city schools, in fact, too many schools in general, are well thought out enough to be successful over the long haul. So that's my concern, was the articulation piece. I don't think has been there, and that's why they're failing.
Okay, let's talk about a template that you sent to me. I'd like to start with a chart that you provided. Whether or not a school is starting from scratch or with an already existing school, you provided a template of how an effective school must function. You've entitled it Working as One. We're going to throw it up on the screen right now. Can you take us through it? Let's start with the triangle in the center.
Right. Well, what I wanted to do, again, I wanted viewers to see in the most simplistic way how this would work. So I think I tried to capture the key components. But what you have is, on one side, you have what the district must do. On the other side, you have what school staff must do, and they need to do this in harmony. And the point you just made is, in the pyramid, and I used the pyramid specifically because Maslow's hierarchy of need, I wanted to represent that in some way. Both the school staff as well as district leaders, when they come together to form these, they should have one purpose, and that purpose is to provide the things that I've shown inside the pyramid, and more importantly, that those things need to happen within the school in a particular order. So that's why I had it set up the way it is with,
Right.
with the foundation.
And first, at the bottom, most important, ensure that health needs are met. Physical, social, emotional stability first.
It's critical. I mean, I still think it's crazy that people don't understand the kids who are fearful, who are hungry, that need glasses. I mean, I'm really curious as to how many kids we have sitting in city schools right now in classrooms who need glasses and don't have them. So the whole health piece, the need to be cared for, to be loved, but more importantly that the physiological, the physical needs need to be met if we want to have students who are ready to learn.
And this is a territory we covered. If you were watching our program, the last two programs that we had, we covered this.
Yep.
Building upon that, then a culture that fosters resiliency.
Right.
What I didn't understand about resiliency, you provided me an educational leadership article. It was reprinted there, something called Fostering Resiliency in Kids. And I'll put that on the screen. You folks can look for it. An article by Bonnie Bedard. It was eye-opening to me. 4 parts of profile of a resilient child. Social competence, which involves flexibility, empathy, caring, communication skills. Problem solving, which means planning, resourcefulness, and seeking help. A 3rd part, autonomy, which means acting independently, a sense of purpose, having goals, educational aspirations, persistence, and hopefulness, especially in the context of a situation that looks hopeless. These represent resiliency. We talked about that quite a bit. I would recommend this article for those of you who would like to know more about that. We talked about that in our last program.
Absolutely.
So that's the second part.
Right.
And then, finally, at the top of this, providing an academic challenge.
Right, and that's what most people probably think of in terms of school, the intellectual, the academic piece. And by no means am I saying that kids shouldn't start learning till they're in 6th or 7th or 10th grade and everything else is in place. But what I'm saying is, developmentally, we need to understand that there are certain things that human beings require to grow. And once they're grown and they feel that they have a sense of purpose and they have self-esteem, and they feel that resiliency switch has been turned on, then it's really up to them, almost more than the teacher and those people around them, to take on that academic growth. So again, I broke it down in 3 components: the physical, physiological needs. Once that's met, then it really becomes a social, emotional piece. Can they get along with peers? How are they going to enter? What kind of relationships are they going to have with others? Do they feel confident enough to take on a challenge that they normally would be afraid of? And then lastly, finally, okay, now we have this human being. Like it's like preparing now you can a race car, and the motor and everything's in place, and now we can turn the motor. I think we're too quick often to turn on that motor before the other elements of the car are in place.
Do you think that district leaders and school staff accept the 3 parts of this triangle?
That's a great question. And in fact, I think they do. I think that it is common sense that you would accept it. I think if any parent would certainly find it to be common sense, and I think that most teachers would as well. So I think that the elements that I described in the order that I described within the pyramid, I think both sides would agree with. That's the easy part. It's the pieces on the outside both separately and trying to get them to come together to create this culture, I think that's where it gets sticky.
So you have said in a document that you provided along with this that the Rochester City School District has failed miserably in establishing defining expectations and preparation.
Absolutely.
So let's look at, on this chart, on first of all the district side.
Right.
Publicly embrace the vision and the aligned autonomy. We've got a couple things in here.
Right.
First of all, the autonomy piece.
Well, I think, and again, I'm talking specifically about a new school model. So what would happen if you took one of the schools that Erica talked about and you wanted to create a school that would be a very good school for a long period of time, not for 6 months or a year. And both sides need to agree on this. And one of the things that I think is critical is the district leaders need to agree to give the people in the school the autonomy that they need. And they need to do that in a very public way. It's one thing to tell somebody on Broad Street, we're going to let you have a school, we're going to give you some freedom. It's entirely different to put everything in paper and lay it out so not only the teachers know that, the parents know that, but the public knows that as well. So what I'm contending is what the district needs to do is they need to very publicly say, we want to create these models, we're going to give these schools all the autonomy they want, and they're going to spell what that autonomy looks like.
Would you also advocate for giving the established schools more autonomy?
There's no question, absolutely no question. And again, I wouldn't advocate giving a school to anyone, whether it's a good or bad school. I mean, I do think that there needs to be a high level of scrutiny to determine if the people who want to either create these models or who are in existing schools and want to make them better are qualified to do so. I think there needs to be some sort of benchmarks to determine whether, but there's no, I'm convinced the only way this district's going to turn around is if the leadership on central office somehow relinquishes most, if not all, of their current centralization to gives it to the schools and let them run and show.
An organization that has power voluntarily gives up its power, is what you're suggesting.
That's what I'm suggesting. I know, and I listen. We've tried everything else. Come on, and again, this is a policy that was endorsed openly by Dr. Urbanski. The living contract and the RTA, the teacher's contract, promotes this. The superintendent in his action plan made mention of the fact specifically he wanted to see new managers run these schools. So this isn't a new idea. They've been around forever. It's long overdue.
And as we continue to have schools that are successes, last time you spoke about several schools that had success because they were able to essentially let the district force the district to have hands off while things did, at least
a little. They might have a little more autonomy. And remember, I remember what we talked about, and this is key. It's huge. In many of the most successful schools in Rochester, you have a parent group that's very vocal, even if it's small parent group. So that parent group is these are the kind of people that go down to a school board meeting or call the superintendent's office and say, hands off, we got a good thing and here's what we want to do. What I'm saying is, what if you don't have that parent group? The district still, in my mind, still has an obligation to do the right thing for the principal and the teachers and those other parents who may not be as engaged. So that was number one, is provide that autonomy.
Okay, we're unbelievably getting almost done with this section. Let's see if we can get to that second one. Codify process, including expectations and measures.
Correct.
When you say codify process, you mean establish a policy.
Yeah, it's got, again, it is mind-boggling to me, having opened a charter school, that we had to submit almost 1,000-page typed document before we could open the school. And yet there's things that happen in the city school district, major I'll give you an example. So let's use the code of conduct policy, which apparently is being rewritten, and they've outsourced
30 seconds.
They've outsourced the code of conduct policy. People don't know what's going on. Everything needs to be articulated in paper so we can all be on the same page. It's critical.
They've outsourced it?
The code of conduct policy is a community group is doing it.
Oh, within the community, though.
Yes, within the community.
Okay.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, we're going to take a break now. We're going to come back and finish up what the district leaders must do and talk about what school staff must do. Don't go away. You're in Spotlight on Schools. Welcome back to Spotlight on Schools. We're talking with John Bliss, a longtime Rochester City school teacher and also charter school teacher and education gadfly. We're talking about working as one, a chart that John has provided to us. We've been talking about what district leaders must do. We were talking about codifying the process, including expectations and measures. I'd like to go to measures. What measures should the district have at their disposal?
Well, I think what the district needs to make it clear to anyone that wants to start a school, here's what we expect. Here are the outcomes we're looking for. They need to be very clear about that, and when we expect to see them. And they need to be laid out. If it's 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, that needs to be out there. And if they hit those, we often hear that when we fall short or when schools fall short, what happens when they hit them? Is there a reward? Is there something given when you hit those? So I just think that part of this whole process needs to include not only expectations, but how those expectations are going to be measured. And again, this all needs to be very public.
And are we talking graduation rate and test scores?
All of those things. I mean, there needs to be multiple measures. Again, I have no problem with everything from standardized test scores to something less significant like what do parents and kids think of the school lunch. I mean, I really think that if you're going to measure a school and its culture, you have to look at things a little differently, and I think that needs to be a pretty broad scope.
Yeah. Other people who've been here, reformers, have talked about portfolio assessment, those types of things.
Absolutely.
Performance pieces in all different arenas. That's all part of it.
They can all be part of it. Again, it would be up to the district and the school founders, if you will, to determine what specifically those were. What I'm arguing is whatever they are, they need to be out there and everyone needs to understand them.
And that goes back to the word transparency.
It's a word that I not only did I not fully understand, but I'm not sure I embraced it until I ran my own school. Everyone needs to know what's going on.
So transparency not only on the part of the district, but on the part of the school staff as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, ensure reporting and support. So that's the district. Let's then move over to the school staff side. School staff must articulate their vision and implementation plan.
Right. That's the biggie. Those are the two biggies. I mean, they drive everything else. And I think that again, going back to Erica's article, I think one of the reasons why we give a school a new name but it falls short is we don't articulate in detail, well, what's going to happen, how's it going to happen, how are we going to measure it, how are we going to revise it if it isn't working. All of those things need to be on paper. So here's a classic, a very small example. If a student runs in the hallway, is there a punishment? Are students allowed to run in the hallway? And if you're a teacher and I'm a custodian, do we have the same reaction to that student? We have to. My point is, schools have to be consistent and everyone in the school has to be on the same page. If the plan itself is not clear, you're never going to have that. Last time I was here, remember we talked about the fact that as a city school teacher, I go to school the day before it opens. My principal knew she was going to get our program 3 days before open. Guaranteed mediocrity at best, given those conditions. So the plan needs to be incredibly clear. And how are we going to carry it out? Again, we talked about U of R spending 3 weeks getting their teachers ready over the summer. Every city school should spend at least a week, if not 2 weeks, getting their teachers ready. So that's, for me, those are the two biggest ones, the plan itself and how you're going to implement it.
Yeah, you had mentioned somewhere in this document, early in this document that you sent, 10 days. You suggested 10 days. Now that's for a new school, right?
Right.
Okay, and perhaps if you're a veteran and you've been going to the same school, you taught at the same school for 10 years and you have a similar vision, perhaps 2 weeks, you don't need 2 weeks, but you probably ought to need more than one to put your bulletin boards up.
No doubt. No doubt. And again, what we're talking about is something that is rewritten. So you take everything that's now very detailed and have everybody on the same page, I would say a week would be a low number, even for a veteran staff. I would say 7 to 10 days is still going to be required.
Okay. Get buy-in and prepare.
Yep.
Buy-in on the parts of whom?
Everyone in the school. I think that's another huge mistake. Even if you have a well-articulated plan and you prepare so people understand how you're going to implement the plan, if you have doubters within those walls, then they shouldn't be there. Now, so again, my point is you need to have all the people who are involved in this be emotional about it. They have to actually buy into the vision. And evidence, I mean, there's years of research that says when people believe in it, it's no different than going to work each day. When you're happy about what you're doing, you feel that it's helping to make the world a better place, you're a more productive worker. It's the same thing in schools.
So you're talking about staff and administration.
I'm talking about cafeteria workers. I'm talking about custodians. I'm talking about parents, kids.
Parents.
Everyone needs to know, here's where we're going and here's where we're going. We're all in this together. It's common sense. There aren't many schools that do it, very few.
Well, that's difficult to do, to get buy-in from the parents. Now, we're talking not just making them aware, but to get them to buy in.
There's no question. And you might have to go to their house. You may have to go to a lot of houses. And it may not happen before school opens. It may take a week or it may take a year. But I'll tell you, if you're a committed staff, regardless of what kind of rascals you have coming through that door every day, those parents are going to get behind you. If they know you're fighting for their kid, they will get behind you.
Okay. Hold everyone accountable is the last thing on this chart.
Yep.
Hold everyone accountable.
Again, a word that I was not a fan of, like the transparency word. Everyone needs to be accountable, and those measures need to be clear. The custodian, the food service people, the teachers, the principal, the parents, and the kids. Everyone needs to be accountable. And it can't just be a word. There needs to be measures. There needs to be evaluation measurements to see, are we in fact all doing what we promised we would do?
Twice in this document, you mentioned the word monthly. As a former teacher, monthly
Absolutely.
would made me crazy to make those reports on a monthly basis. We had to do five a month.
Right.
Now, one of the nice things that we had towards the end of my tenure, I retired in 2010, was that we were allowed to put our grade. We were encouraged and finally required to post our grades.
Absolutely.
On
Power score, whatever it is. Yeah.
So that parents could just automatically know
Right.
the grades. Now, at first, the learning curve was,
Yeah.
for an old guy like me, was tough. But then it solved a lot of problems. How's my kid doing? Well, log on.
But I got that beat.
You
I
got
got
the
that.
beat?
I got that solved.
Hit me.
I'll tell you how you got it solved. If with all the emphasis we put on data, it is insane that schools don't have a data person, somebody whose sole responsibility is to dashboard all this information, whether it's parent satisfaction, whether it's your test scores, all this information that we're going to use to determine whether a school is successful or not, to hold people accountable. If I'm a teacher, I shouldn't be doing that. I mean, the teachers are the rock stars of the school. I mean, the principal is obviously the leader. So I don't want my rock star. I want my rock star performing on stage. I don't want him lifting speakers and setting up, acting like a roadie. So I think every school there should be a designated data person in the unit that I shared with the city school district. The proposal, I had a data person, and all you do, they collect it and they print out. Red is bad, yellow's okay, green is great. It's all dashboard form. Some of the best schools in the country already do this. It's not difficult, and it will not take more time. No, very easy.
Boy, I'm going to have to take that one on faith. However, let's move on.
I'll show you some other time.
Okay, yes, we will, because our time is short. Let's talk about selecting principals, keeping them, evaluating them, and selecting staff, keeping them, evaluating them. Let's start with principals.
Well, I know that here, there's principals out there, and some are great, and some are good, and some are not so good. I have to think that you're never going to get rid of the unions, whether they be administrators or teachers unions. So you're going to have to find a way to get principals who are going to be those star principals, those Martin Haberman teachers. Well, there's Martin Haberman principals, and I don't have a secret recipe for finding those principals to share with you right now, but they're out there, and I do think that if the principals are not sufficient, then they shouldn't be leading a school.
Let me read what you wrote here. Principals and other school leaders need to be honest, inspiring, mission-driven, fair, respected, and smart.
Right.
They should also understand teachers, students, and the learning process. School leaders should be selected and assigned by a diverse team that really understand what schools need. And I have that underlined, and I'm guessing that you suspect the district doesn't always know what schools need.
You're so right.
Oh, I'm so perceptive.
You're so right.
Once in place, leaders should be evaluated differently. Value-added measures must be included. Value-added, that's a term that means if kids have increased their knowledge or their scores or their abilities, that goes into the evaluation of those people. We're down to 4 minutes left, so.
Here's a quick example. How often I'm a teacher. Teachers are going to evaluate the principal, in part. How often do you come into my room and give me a hand? How often do you come in and peek in? I'm going to give you a number 1 through 4, 4 being off the charts, 1 being crummy. If I never see you, you're getting a 1. If you're in my room every day talking to kids, you're getting a 4.
Teacher, principal, do you encourage me? Do you challenge me? If you challenge me, am I going to give you a good score? If you challenge me in a positive way, do I give you a good score? If you challenge me and make me work harder, am I inclined to give you a good score? But if the result is good,
the results will be good, but even if they're not good, this goes back to my point. Everyone needs to buy in. So as a staff, we've already worked through all that stuff. We know where we're going and how we're going to get there. The expectations are clear in advance. We're not going to have these problems down the road because we've already been in the trenches up front.
Okay.
Yep.
How about teachers? You talked about star teachers. We had a conversation on the break that said, I asked you what percentage of teachers you think are star teachers? You said 10%.
Right.
Well, that means 90% aren't star teachers.
Right.
What can we do with those?
Well, you can. And by star teachers, I mean teachers that have that special gift. There's overwhelmingly most of the teachers are good teachers. But you can take, if the system that you have in place in a school is supportive enough, and it is clear enough about what you want teachers to do, even good teachers, mediocre teachers can still do well. Kids can still learn with mediocre teachers if the system, if the culture in the school is still a great one. Where you run into problems is when the culture's not good, and then you have teachers who are mediocre who are then essentially drowning because they're not getting the support they want. That's when you have real issues.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we're down to 2 minutes left. I have a question that I wanted to ask. It's on this piece of paper. To those watching, I'm not sure who you are. Contact me on Facebook, Jim Strauss. How can they contact you, by the way?
Well, the easiest way is Public School Bliss, that email, Public School Bliss. I'd be happy to.
.com?
It's .com, yep.
Okay. Now, what advice can you give? People may feel helpless. An editorial in the recent Democrat and Chronicle urged people to vote out incumbent Board of Education members. What other avenues are open to them?
I don't know. Voting out, listen, I don't know that it matters if you replace somebody with somebody new. I think what parents can do, and I think the most powerful group to change this are parents. I really think that they're the most independent and powerful group. And what they've got to do, I would tell them to go down to City Hall. I really would. I don't think this fix, I'm not saying City Hall should take over the school district, because that is not the fix. But I think the fix needs to come from a political leader somewhere outside of the city school district. And I don't know that the mayor's the right person. I don't know if the governor's the right person. I've spent the last, I don't know how many years screaming over somebody's got to do something about this. And I think it needs to be a leader of some sort that's not on Broad Street.
Somebody like Bill Calla?
Even bigger than Bill Calla. I mean, somebody that's more influential than Bill Calla. He has the voice of, I think, quite a few people related to the testing thing. I think it needs to be, I don't know if a David Gant or somebody that has some pull in Albany and also knows Rochester community. That'd be nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we're out of time. It's been great. I want to thank you.
Went by
John
fast.
Bliss. It sure did. Don't lose faith. Keep coming back. You've been watching Spotlight on Schools. Join us next time. Good night.